My podcast is on the national plan to end Parkinson's Act, which goes into effect as of January now, 2025. Again, it was signed in July of 2024 after being passed by Congress. So I want you to enjoy this.
Okay, first, from between 2 feet, I'm going to give an update on my trip to the wound clinic. But I wanted to mention that there's been virtually no conversation about the national plan to end Parkinson's Act since they celebrated the signing of it back in July 2024, and the possibility of it being funded and anything happening in 2025 is something I want to look at as to what the status is and some of the things I've reported on in the past, and I'll let you judge what you think is going to happen in the new administration.
Okay, this week at the Wound Center, I'm in a much smaller room, a lot more intimacy, I guess. I guess you could say I've been downsized. I don't mind that. I mean, a place over here for my water bottle. They need to have cup holders here and probably a TV, but I can manage pretty well just by having my iPhone here. I can keep occupied, so here we go again. Connection with the big man. I'm seeing another person this time. Very good for the situation I'm in. When he came, or what?
No, he actually hired me. He was the one that made the move to get me over here. I was trying to find a wound care group, and I didn't know he already knew about me, but he did. I just graduated. This is my second career. Our daughters are very good friends. They've been friends since kindergarten.
Yeah.
And we were all at this homecoming procession. My daughter was in it, and his daughter was supporting my daughter. And he saw me in the crowd, and he's like, "Hey, come by and see me."
Well, what was your first career? If it was a second career?
Well, I was the best meth cook in Arkansas.
Meth cook?
Yeah, I was
He
the
worked for the
chief
crime lab.
illicit laboratory chemist at the Arkansas State Crime Lab.
Oh, well,
He had to test it all.
that gets your attention. Well,
You don't scare people saying it that way.
well, I know, but her daughter's in criminology, and so I thought there was going to be a kind of a connection there somewhere.
Usually you can't get a job in medicine if you've got a criminal record. They're not going to play around. So
Well, I couldn't get a job at CIA if I'd taken drugs either. But there's a different time, I guess, for different folks. Back a few years ago, there's a lot of things you couldn't do and get hired. And I went through polygraphs and all kinds of stuff. It's amazing. Probably things you're seeing.
a little bit of silver nitrate.
I'm getting it.
You're seeing at cabinets appointments that probably couldn't pass none of the tests that I had.
You're right.
So I don't know what's going on these days.
I think the rules might have changed. I don't know.
I know it. There's a lot of crazy things happening.
So I'm concerned about the shoe that you're wearing to walk around in.
Well, we were supposed to get some other shoes, but I haven't had time to do anything with them.
Well, let's talk about how important it is.
Okay, that's what I need to know, because I'm probably going there next.
Good.
Good.
See
You can actually buy one on Amazon for $30. It's not very expensive. There's like 2 or 3 versions. You can always pay
The ones
more.
that's in the paper, I got a copy of some last week.
Yeah, the sheets that we gave you, that's
Yeah.
the best choices.
Is that the best place in? For
Snell and Hortons are going to sell them, but they're always going to be more expensive than if
Yeah,
you just
well,
got
no,
one. About
I don't-
$20 maybe, not a lot.
Well, I'm just looking at something and that's probably what I'm looking at, is what you suggest.
It's called a heel lift offloading shoe.
Yeah,
And
that's
it
what I'm
takes,
looking for. You can get
takes
those on
all the
Amazon.
pressure off your heel.
So you can get them on Amazon, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I'm looking for that then.
And you have the Prime thing where they'll mail it to you in a couple days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
the way
Because
to
it'll
do
be
it.
like $26 or something.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna look for that one, then.
Yeah.
That's what.
Some days there's, 35, some days they're 19, some
I know.
days 22, you know,
Yeah, this time of year, you never know.
you don't.
And if there's a lot of supply out there, then it's probably gonna be cheap. And
Mhm.
it could be that right now is a good time to buy, so I'll look at that and,
Well, offloading is the most critical thing for healing a wound on the
Yeah.
bottom of your foot. There's
well, I've been, last few days watching football and not doing a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Other than
That's
when
great, as long as there's no pressure. But now, whenever you're on the couch or the recliner, make sure that you're floating your legs so that this heel never rests on your recliner. You don't
So,
ever
hang
want
them
your
off
Like
the-
right now, what it's
hang them
doing
off
is
the
perfect.
edge like that.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I'm gonna
So
take-
here's how critical it is. Those little baby skin cells are trying to grow across the wound bed. They're called keratinocytes, and they have the tensile strength of a piece of wet tissue paper.
Okay,
And so if you were to walk on a piece of wet tissue paper, even 20 steps, it would just shred it to pieces.
so
So
that,
the
that's why
moral-
it just keeps on and on and on and on.
Right. And so the moral is that 20 steps in an entire day without your shoe is too many.
Okay,
So you really want to try to take every single step. And if you happen to walk without it, make sure you're walking on the front of your foot. Don't
Yeah.
walk on the back of your foot
okay,
because it's just
Tiptoe.
mashing those little sensitive cells. But
Yeah.
the wound is very healthy. There's no signs of infection, but I can see that there's some damage on the back side of it from walking on it.
yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what I'm trying
It
to
looks
find.
good. Let's get it.
Okay, when I returned, I put this shirt on. I'm not mumbling.
As you might see,
It's Parkinson. So I think you can see that the voice wasn't very clear, so I did a voiceover on this. But I was in the bathroom, and I wanted to say that when I was there, that I had the LA cap on, and that was, I guess, the big man there. He's a big Cardinal fan, and I had to say that, you know, the situation was that I went on the fan transfer portal, and I switched over to LA, and I've done something similar with the Razorbacks, and I've switched over to the Texas Longhorns. Not that I'm a big fan of Texas Longhorns, but I do have a friend, a family friend, that passed a few years back, and he had brain cancer, and he was always a big fan of the, Texas Longhorns. So I thought, in his memory, and also the fact that Razorbacks they've been the last few years pretty mediocre, and they've been playing in mediocre bowls and celebrating victory. I thought, well, that's probably a good time for me to, dress with the Texas Longhorn cap, and also to talk about the fact that I'd been, I'd met the big man today. But the person that treated me was really the proper person to handle it, and he did a great job, and he really did a lot of things in conversation to kind of direct me to to doing the better things with my feet, so that I can get this wound taken care of and not have it hang on forever or develop into some situation where it was creating a bigger problem than it had been. So that was the nature of the conversation at this time.
remaining.
Michael J. Fox. Michael J. Fox is one of the most beloved actors of our time. With remarkable wit and charm, he introduced iconic characters to the center of American culture, from Alex B. Keaton to Marty McFly and more. With undaunted resilience and optimism, he also warms hearts and captivates audiences as a fearless advocate for those with Parkinson's disease, channeling his endearing personality to advance treatments, move us closer to a cure, and remind us of the power of American possibilities.
Michael J. Fox has become the face of Parkinson's over the last few years. I think we always identify with him and his tremors, and I think as you kind of go into this, you'll see that there are other types of Parkinson's that I want to discuss. My Parkinson's is a lot like Ryan Reynolds' father, and as you'll see, he thought his father had gone nuts because he had become so delusional. So I want to make you aware of that difference.
The Wolverine.
Yes, you are, and I'm gonna need you to come with me right now. Last week, I walked around New York City with Hugh, and it was wild to walk around. It felt like we maybe saved a baby from a burning building or something. It was pretty wild. People really found a lot of love and joy and happiness in the movie, and that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Your little cinematic universe is about to change forever.
After racing past $1 billion at the box office, Deadpool and Wolverine is on track to become the highest-grossing R-rated movie of all time. But now, the third installment of Reynolds' passion project is facing a battle at the box office with the movie It Ends With Us, starring Ryan's wife, Blake Lively.
Despite your successful and happy marriage, you're famously vicious professional rivals. So did you say to her, I beat you by that much at the box office?
Only time in my life I've ever dreamt of coming in second. No, I think that's like the sign of a good relationship. It's always been the one kind of constant with Blake and I is that, we really root for each other.
The 47-year-old Reynolds is father to 4 kids with Lively. Their newest addition, a baby boy, arrived last year. Fatherhood has Ryan rethinking a complicated relationship with his own dad, James, who died in 2015 after a 20-year battle with Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's affects an estimated 1 million Americans, including Michael J. Fox and my father, Bill Geist.
I was reading through your dad's story, and my gosh, is it almost shot for shot our story, which is diagnosed at a pretty young age.
Yeah,
my
your dad was 47,
47,
48,
yeah. And denial for a long time.
Yeah.
In fact, we didn't name it for a long time.
No. And Matt might have said Parkinson's, I think, 3 times in his entire life, to me. It wasn't until very late into my father's battle that I even knew hallucinations and delusions were common in people with Parkinson's.
Today, Ryan, alongside his mother Tammy, is partnering with Acadia Pharmaceuticals to raise awareness about some lesser-known warning signs of Parkinson's.
Jim came home from a trip, and he was convinced I'd been in the car with him. I was not in the car.
Reynolds' dad, among the 50% of Parkinson's patients who experience delusions and hallucinations, says neurologist Dr. Daniel Kremens.
People think of Parkinson's disease as just like a motor disease where they have a little bit of tremor or maybe some slowness or difficulty walking. But Parkinson's disease is so much more complicated than that.
I just kind of cast it as, he's losing his marbles. Had I known, I think I would have handled it better. I think I would have been a much more patient person. I think my father would have felt way less alone.
In his father's final months, a moment of joy.
He met your first child, right?
He met my daughter, James.
Yes.
Who's named for him.
So you got that pleasure.
Yeah, and I love that she got to meet him. Granddaughters would have really changed him.
Yeah, right. Softens you right up.
Yeah.
Wow.
In addition to being such a truly a great guy. People always wonder, what are they really like? Ryan is one of the all-time great guys. He has been such a great advocate for Parkinson's disease. And as I said, that's kind of where we bonded. We're both on the board of the Michael J. Fox Foundation. He continues to do such great work, including here in the fight against Parkinson's.
I learned something from that. I didn't know about the
Yeah, I didn't really either, to be honest with you. It's
Yeah.
not something we've experienced, but half of Parkinson's patients do experience these hallucinations and delusions. So
Ryan might be a great advocate, but Willie Geist has also turned into a pretty fantastic advocate as well for Parkinson's.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you can find more about Ryan's new initiative at More to Park.
Well, you know, I'm not sure where Willie Geist, Ryan Reynolds, and Acadia Pharmaceuticals are at this point in time about the national plan to end Parkinson's that's supposed to go into effect in January 2025. We got a lot of no-shows, and there's just nothing's being said at all about this national plan. And of course, it is under the direction of the, Department of Health, and you can imagine that no one really wants to talk about delusional Parkinson's at this point in time. I think it's probably a time for that subject. So we'll see.
All right. In this week's podcast, I wanted to focus on the national plan to end Parkinson's. I wanted to spend some time recapping some of the things I talked about earlier in the year, and that was with Dr. Lyda Adkins Kreiner, that we talked about the caregiving. So you'll see that toward the halfway part, or the last part of this. So don't miss that. There's a lot of things that we talked about and why it had become clinical, and you wonder about the success of this program. At this point, we know that with the new administration and some of the cabinet members and some of the other things, we wonder, what's going to happen with that plan. There was some victory laps taken back in July, and since that time, it's been pretty silent. I think there's a lot of thinking that this is going to go into research, but I will show you that there's a lot of money to be saved on care, and when you identify it early, you have a great possibility of a quality of life and doing things, and that's what you're going to see in my podcast.
Be allocated, and where does the money come from?
That is the million-dollar question that we don't have an answer to. One of the things that we put in this legislation was for the advisory council and the secretary to identify what they believe is a reasonable amount that the federal government should be investing in Parkinson's research. As I said earlier, currently the government spends about 100 times more on caring for people with PD, about $26 billion, versus what they spend on research, which is about $260 million. And so where those numbers end up, we're not certain at this point, but that's a big part of why we want this group of experts to come together to really chart out what is it going to take to make a mark, to slow the disease, hopefully one day cure the disease. We don't have any predetermined dollar figure in mind. And I will say that was a very common question by congressional offices. They figured, this is a Trojan horse. You have a number in mind. What is it? Tell us now. We're like, no, we don't. Because, in some case, we could get $1 trillion tomorrow. And that doesn't mean that a cure is coming any faster because of the way research works and how it's iterative. And that's why every breakthrough that happens along the way, through funding by your organization, my organization, or the government, it all are additional baby steps toward new treatments.
Absolutely. And as we all know, if we could identify people early on and then have treatments, we may be in a situation where PD doesn't even raise its ugly head because we have nipped it in the bud. So, yeah.
Well, that's one of the hopes with the biomarker breakthrough, is that we're going to be able to identify people much earlier in the progression, possibly even before they're ever diagnosed, before they've lost the 70-80% of the dopamine. That could prove to be hugely beneficial. Another part of our strategy overall is around prevention of environmental risk factors, which is a topic for another day. But that is another very important facet of the policy work that we're doing.
Absolutely. And we're all behind you. So the next question we have is, how will the progress of this initiative be evaluated and measured? And how do we follow any updates regarding the national plan? What is our source for information?
Well, we will definitely be publishing information, and APDA and other members of the UPAC will publish information. With the National Alzheimer's Project Act, they actually have an entire listserv communication. So I'm assuming that the government will set up a listserv that anybody on this call will be able to sign up to get their messages. And through that, they communicate upcoming meetings, get information on alterations to their national plan. And so, we will be broadcasting this far and wide through our own channels, through our UPAC members, and through the government. One point that I want to make, though, is we need to make sure that the government does what it's been told to do. Sometimes things like this pass, everybody does their victory lap and says how great we are because we did this bill, and then they move on to something else. That's a recipe for failure. And so we are going to be keeping an eye on this, watching this, working with you and others to make sure that the federal government does what it's been told to do by Congress.
Right. The whole race isn't finished until we get to the end. And that's the point of advocacy, that we will be staying on top of that.
So
and,
I'm yet to hear
people stand
anything.
by.
I guess I'm not in the loop.
To, entertain and educate and motivate and show some of the things of the after effects or whatever of being delusional. But it's suited for anybody. And we're seeing a lot of people now that are willing to give their lives for their cause, that have depression and anxiety. So something that not only people with disabilities, but employees of the larger companies should be watching and should subscribe to. I think you'll find that it's all, the type of information that's very beneficial and can reduce health care. Now, you're going to find in this podcast that the enemy of your enemy
is your
enemy.
friend.
And I'm talking about a lot of great friends are enemies of Parkinson's. And so they become your friends. But there are some things that I'm concerned with, and it does have to get political because of the nature of the act being done by Congress and, again, signed by President. But when you come into this year, there's a lot of issues that I'm seeing. I know that the president has his own way of doing things, but this year it seems a little different. You can be not running again, and what your campaign promises may not mean as much as they did if you're elected, and there's a possibility of having to run for a re-election. Now, whether he thinks there's a way to get around that, yet to be seen. But my concern is pretty obvious when you have some of the department heads, and the department head of health and welfare is going to be, at this point, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and we know what his thinking is on a lot of things, and I think that there'd be concern that we'd be taking a lot of steps backwards on Parkinson's, because he's maybe convinced that you could have taken a vaccine and got worse. But the test that I took, and again, I took this in 2012, it was a battery of tests that took most of a day. It wasn't that 10-minute test that Trump talks about that he took, and he did well. A lot of people took that test and did very well, and I don't think that's even a challenge to be made to anybody, whether it's for him or anybody else. The real test, and it's explained in this podcast, and it's explained by people who are in the know. They're neurologists of what the differences are. The other concerns I have is that the whole focus of Trump has been bullying, and I don't see any empathy or sympathy toward anybody with disabilities. I have not seen a video yet that I've sensed that at all on him or Elon Musk or others. And my concern is there that you can be consumed with revenge, and you can be consumed with the idea of imperialism, either to get even on a cause or come up with some idea that it would be helpful. But he's only mentioned probably of reducing the price of groceries is that it's going to be a bigger job than he thought. And then he's been complicated when you start putting tariffs out there. No matter what you say, if somebody puts a tariff on something, that means the cost goes up. And you can say what you want about U.S. people or whatever. The other thing that's kind of created a split, and as is in the MAGA group, and it's pretty obvious. You can go and see the Steve Bannon and see that he's definitely against the H-1B. He thinks that's just a loophole against what Trump's campaign promises was to stop immigration of illegals or even people coming from other countries at this point. Now, Elon Musk and his pal Vivek, he made a lot of money off of artificial intelligence, and they want those key people coming from India, and I'm aware of that. My two primary neurology doctors are the best ones, and they're from India. I think they're both born there. I know that Dr. Dahl was. And then I have a, I
grandson.
My son's fiance is from that area as well. So I'm very aware of the talents. She's in med school, so I know that they all got great talents that come from there. But Steve Bannon says that there are a lot of people here that can do those jobs, and he doesn't want to replace by people from foreign countries. And obviously the big thing there has been Latin America, Mexico, and South America, and all those countries. But it's been expanded, and you can see that there's going to be a major battle there. And I point to a thing that's symbolic in a way, but when you have a person of the military, I guess he had won all kinds of awards, decides to commit suicide by driving a Tesla truck over to the hotel there. And when you see that the hotel has Trump's name on it, then you have to worry about in the future, is there going to be a case where people are smart enough that they can have the driverless car? And I've been in those. I went in the ones out in Phoenix. And I wanted to. So connecting the dots is pretty easy on this. The Waymo that picked us up, Christy and I, at a Walmart, came without a driver, and it was empty. So you can imagine that people who are disgruntled, MAGA or whatever, can easily figure out a way to, whether it be a Tesla, for purposes of making the point of the, it can be loaded up with a bomb and can come to a location, and we're pulling in here to our destination and then blow it up. That, in case she ever needs that in the future, is where she needs to get around by using something like that. So I'm aware of that. But if you can bypass and have it driverless and have something in here equivalent to a bomb, and you want to target something, you're going to see that happening. I mean, this is just a blatant example of that. And you can say what you want, but when you have a president that has shown a lot of bullying, and he's shown a lot of things with, obviously, the imperialism with Canada and Panama and Greenland, the fact that we're battling these other issues with the H-1B, and we're battling other things that you see. It's a major concern, and it's something I wanted to make sure that the national plan to end Parkinson's does move on, and is not destroyed. There's been a lot of clinical sound of silence about this, and whether or not anything's going to happen, it's going to be important. But I think what I'm doing in my podcast is a way to get that message out, and also to keep the cost down. I understand the boondoggle of trying to get broadband out to the rural market, and I think that Elon Musk with his satellites would have a great solution there, and that might be a focus for efficiency. Is not spend a lot of money on the broadband wiring when you can get a very good comparable speed, at least necessary for people in rural markets to handle telehealth, which I think would be the driving force, and even market from those locations. And you can live there and you could market and sell products and receive products and not have the issues. So I'll leave it at that.
Media is dancing around the fact that there could be a lot of Teslas without drivers that could be loaded with bombs, and by disgruntled MAGA could be set off all around the country.
Tales about the special ops soldier who blew himself up and the artificial intelligence they say he used to plan the attack. Tom Winter is here. And Tom, a top police official calling AI in this case a game changer.
Well, that's right, Lester. The potential use of AI by criminals and terrorists in planning violent incidents has been one of the most talked about emerging problems by law enforcement officials coast to coast over the past year. Officials in Las Vegas say Matthew Livelsberger used ChatGPT to conduct searches about laws and what he would need to use to set off explosive powder. Specifically, they say he asked ChatGPT the amount of explosives he would need, how and where to buy the fireworks for his explosive, and if he was to use a firearm to set off the explosive, what speed a bullet would need to travel to get a specific powder to explode. He also asked AI how he could avoid detection. Police in Las Vegas believe this is the first large-scale incident planned with help from ChatGPT in the U.S. The NYPD says AI has already been used by the terrorist group ISIS to help them make anonymous propaganda.
Some very specific information there. And did officials talk about the suspect's writings released by a podcaster?
Yes, Lester. The sheriff confirmed and called that a manifesto and says the conspiracy-laden email sent to podcaster Sean Ryan is authentic. It referenced drones, the Chinese spy balloon, and other events tied to the military, some of which NBC News has confirmed are not true.
All right, important information. Tom Witter, thanks very much.
What's not being discussed is what could happen with an AI-driven vehicle. My daughter and I rode in a Waymo, which came to us driverless to a Walmart, and then dropped us off at an address and left driverless. So you can imagine if disgruntled MAGA want to use Tesla, they could do that, and they could load it with bombs, and I think you could see by the example that could be limitless.
2 minutes before he takes office again, President-elect Trump tonight outlining potential dramatic steps to try to acquire the Panama Canal and Greenland, and even rename the Gulf of Mexico. Gabe Gutierrez has more.
In a marathon news conference at Mar-a-Lago, President-elect Trump not ruling out using economic or military coercion to retake the Panama Canal and acquire Greenland.
You're talking about Panama and Greenland. No, I can't assure you on either of those two. But I can say this, we need them for economic security. The Panama Canal was built for our military.
Trump saying the U.S. decision to return control of the canal to Panama in the 90s gave too much influence to China.
China's basically taken it over.
And arguing the U.S. needs Greenland for national security.
You have Russian ships all over the place. We're not letting that happen. The people are going to probably vote for independence or to come into the United States.
The provocative comments come as Donald Trump Jr. visited Greenland today, and the Danish Prime Minister vowed that his country's territory is not for sale.
Just here as tourists, seeing it, looks like an incredible place.
But his father laying out an aggressive foreign policy, expanding U.S. influence, even wanting to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico.
The Gulf of America, what a beautiful name. And it's appropriate. It's appropriate. And Mexico has to stop allowing millions of people to pour into our country.
And after mocking Canada as the 51st state, Trump is floating the idea of using economic, not military force to annex the U.S. ally.
Because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like. And it would also be much better for national security.
Outgoing Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau responding, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. While overseas, Trump is again warning Hamas to release its hostages soon.
If they're not back by the time
we have to take them seriously, but we also.
So the discussion internationally is that when you get into imperialism, what's the difference in Donald Trump and Putin and Russia, and how do you talk about Ukraine? Are you going to say that should be part of Russia?
Lots and lots of heads of government in lots and lots of capitals around the globe on their toes.
Ambassador, Gary questions how we should characterize it at this moment and the style in which he delivers it. A Ukrainian colleague in the office this afternoon remarked that when he refers in this way to Canada and Greenland as crucial to our security, and we have friends there, but we should all be one country, he sounds a lot like Vladimir Putin. It's the same imperial language.
That is very interesting, and the antithesis of President Carter. He made the decision to give back the Panama Canal because it was costing the United States a lot, and it was controversial. It was not an inexpensive entity to maintain, and it belonged to
Panama.
So suggesting that it would be taken back or suggesting that force would be used would bring all of that back, and while taking him seriously, many American presidents, as well as diplomats, leaders around the world, understand that what you personally want or want to have happen does not necessarily happen. It doesn't matter just because the president of the United States.
Except that he negotiates in a zero-sum fashion, and what he's talking about is using economic force. He's talking about significant tariffs on Denmark, significant tariffs, economic force in dealing with an ally like Canada. That is very different to the incumbent of the Oval Office talking about what he would like.
That's true, but we also know that what he has said today may be 180 degrees different than what he says tomorrow. And he's not yet president. Once he gets back in the office, gets the full briefings, presumably it'll be tempered, but he's not consistent. No one will accuse him of that. And he's not yet president. So we will listen and we will see what he does when he gets into office. But again, the comparison to President Carter, it couldn't be more night and day, and we'll see whether his way is more successful.
That's a good place to bring you.
The reason for the press conference was Trump didn't want Jimmy Carter raining on his parade. The timing of his death was bad because it was going to have flags at half-staff during his inauguration.
Always was.
They are polar opposites, but it's interesting because obviously Reagan, who defeated Carter, made him that one-term president, was the one who coined the phrase, make America great again. But he used it in the sense of optimism, not xenophobia, not, I'm talking about anti-immigration. So it's opposite in terms of policy, but there are some sort of similarities. And Reagan was the oldest president at the time. So there are interesting things in terms of age, in terms of how he approached briefings. Reagan was very much keen on not really focusing on the detail of policies. So it's very, very sort of similar in that respect, but very different in the policies that they do land on and the style of communication. So for Carter, it's absolutely polar opposite. For Reagan, we see some similarities, but we also see the fact that this is definitely now Donald Trump's Republican Party.
Okay. Point is when you bully and you're consumed by revenge and imperialism, you develop a lot of enemies inside the country, outside the country, and there are going to be a lot of, reaction from that. I know as an international business developer and traveler that I would be real concerned about traveling and doing business internationally, because I think the ugly American is coming back. Many years to try to get away from that, but all this action that's being taken would create a lot of concern for security if I was traveling globally, because Americans going to be hated because of these comments, because it's just not as much American dreams as maybe some issues that Trump has, and unfortunately, he, as president, will be speaking for the country, and I know that that would be a disaster as far as any travel that I was doing globally, because you really don't want that in the background. It's very dangerous, and that's it's a concern for that, but it's also a major distraction from some of the efforts that we're trying to do with the national plan to end Parkinson's. I've had that discussion for over the past 12 years. I don't have tremors. Each time I go to see Dr. Vermani at UAMS, I keep bringing that subject up, and he always comes back to the same answer, because I'm doing the tests that are described in this podcast, and the results are the same. I have been determined to have Parkinson's. I wonder why all the experts are missing that. Could it be the political issues that come up with someone staying in office past their time? I'll let you determine that when you watch some of the videos and some of the reports that I've developed. Okay, Dr. Tuvin Vermani. I've been seeing him for the last 8+ years.
At 11:33 a.m., I have renewed questions about my Parkinson's diagnosis based on my appearance on my podcast, No Tremors. Many don't understand lower body PD. Also, I never sense an issue if I fail to take carbidopa-levodopa on schedule like some report. What are some of the other things? Was there any info from the gut lab? I feel I have had a major personality change from introvert to extrovert. Anything else? Message from Tuvin Vermani sent July 8th at 12:49 p.m. Tuvin Vermani. July 8th at 12:49 p.m. We have discussed these, I think, at your most recent visit and in the past as well, but to reiterate, PD doesn't cause tremors in everyone. Levodopa can have a honeymoon period where people do not notice motor fluctuations for a variable length of time in different people. I just responded to your questions about the gut study. The personality can change in PD, sometimes more outward, but usually more reserved and socially isolate.
It's Dr. Daniel Kremens.
People think of Parkinson's disease as just like a motor disease where they have a little bit of tremor or maybe some slowness or difficulty walking. But Parkinson's disease is so much more complicated than that.
I just kind of cast it as, oh, he's losing his marbles. Had I known, I think I would have handled it better. I think I would have been a much more patient person. I think my father would have felt.
Talk more about those 8 White House visits by the Parkinson's expert. I'm joined tonight by Dr. Tom Pitts. He's a quadruple board-certified neurologist. He sees patients with Parkinson's all the time. He diagnoses it. I want to be completely transparent here. You've never examined President Biden. From my knowledge, you've never even spoken yet to President Biden. Been in the same room as and we're just going to use what we have so far, which is what we've seen, the president's interviews, and the information coming out of the White House. So my first question to you is, as somebody who's a neurologist, what you've seen from the president over the last 2 years, what you saw at the debate, the last few interviews, the way he speaks, the way maybe he walks, have you noticed anything that gives you a red flag as a doctor?
Oh, yeah, I see him 20 times a day in clinic. I mean, it's ironic because he has just such classic features of neurodegeneration. I mean, word finding difficulties, and that's not, I couldn't find the word. That's from degeneration of the word retrieval area.
He's also overcome stuttering, though. Could that be part of that, too?
No, this is not a palatal issue or a speech discrepancy, which is very different from a lemmonode dysfunction, actual word retrieval, where you pick a similar question or talk around the issue, plus the rigidity, monotone voice.
Wait, go back to that, the rigidity. What do you mean?
Rigidity, loss of arm swing, standing up lordotically. You notice when he turns, it's kind of end block turning. It's not a quick turn. That's one of the hallmarks of Parkinsonism is rigidity and bradykinesia, slow movement. And he has that hallmark, especially with the low voice that said was a cold, hypophonia. A small monotone voice like this over time is a hallmark of Parkinsonism. I could have diagnosed him from across the mall.
Here are some of the symptoms from Parkinson's. We just had him up there on the screen. If we can put him back. What about the movement? Some people have pointed out the way he walks. Sometimes it's not very fast, small steps. Is that something that is common in people who are battling a disease like Parkinson's?
Yeah, it's a hallmark. Shuffling gait, we call that, so little steps. Loss of arm swing from the rigidity. When we walk, we have a nice cadence. You notice he doesn't really swing his arms. And end block turning, meaning he kind of pivots around his foot. If you said, hey, President Biden, he wouldn't go like this. But I also know, and tell me if I'm wrong here, it's very hard to diagnose Parkinson's, isn't it? It's not simple. I mean, I've heard that it can be. It's one of the easier movement disorders to diagnose, actually.
Right,
but it's so clinic. There's very little other. And I'm a Democrat. I always say about this.
Right.
It's just like this guy is not a hard case.
But I've had relatives who have gone through neurological issues, and I've heard that sometimes Parkinson's is not very easy to nail. You have to.
Okay, some equal time for the Republican Party, and you can hear this speech where Trump rages on about his microphone, and then he talks about being cognitive, and I know he's having to defend himself on that, but it's kind of interesting in a sense that, you can go back to the Ryan Reynolds video and see the differences there that he talked about with his dad experiencing Parkinson's, and he thought he had gone crazy because he was very delusional in his thinking. And so I want to give you some contrast here that it's not all about motor, it's not all about Michael Fox, but it's some of the things that I'm experiencing. So I was probably as good an expert as anybody on this.
Says neurologist Dr. Daniel Kremens.
People think of Parkinson's disease as just like a motor disease where they have a little bit of tremor or maybe some slowness or difficulty walking. But Parkinson's disease is so much more complicated than that.
I just kind of cast it as, he's losing his marbles. Had I known, I think I would have handled it better. I think I would have been a much more patient person. I think my father would have felt way less alone.
In his father's final months.
Because these stupid people. I'll make you a deal. Pretend you're listening to it perfectly, and I'll come back and do another one, okay? With a decent... It's so stupid. And you know, the only thing I ask for, I don't care about lighting. I don't care about teleprompters because I never read the damn things anyway. By the way, isn't it nice to have a president that doesn't need a frickin' teleprompter? But I don't ask for much. I don't ask for much. The only thing I ask for is a good mic. And this is the second time today that this happened. So now if I were the president, and you know, like a dopey guy like this Kelly, the guy's a total moron, and that happened, I'd fire him, and everybody would say, gee, I'm such a bad person. You're not bad. You fire people. When, for instance, the generals that destroyed us in Afghanistan, every one of them should have been fired. Should have been fired. Hello? Hello? I don't think so. Hello? Is that better? Is that better? That's terrible. Is that better back there? Is that yes or no? What crap. The only thing I asked for is a mic. You don't have to give me, I don't even need a stage. I don't give a damn. Give me a good mic. And I went through 2 of these today. And it knocks the hell out of your throat. But so far I'm doing okay, right? Okay. Is that better? Yeah. And did you notice I came in today, I said, and you know, this is after 4 of these things. I've been, in all fairness, I mean, I'm a human being, right? I come in, and here's the problem. I said, oh man, it's too low. I said, it's too low. So, I had to go. Way too low. Way too low. So I walk in, I said, shit, there's nothing worse than I walk in like this and did you notice? I was bending over like this, hello. And then everybody says, is there something wrong with his back? What the hell is wrong with that guy? They're saying he's cognitively impaired and physically impaired. There's something wrong with them all because I have guys that are stupid back there. All right, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, right?
Donald Trump, when last in charge, told people to inject bleach to deal with the pandemic. He claimed that the 2020 election was stolen, but now seems to have gone very quiet about that. He has called climate change a hoax. He promoted the idea that Barack Obama was not born in America, and he expressed support for people who stormed the US Capitol and tried to murder his then vice president. So we're going to get 4 more years.
These people are crazy. There's something wrong with them. There's something wrong with them. They also want to go back, and they have already started that, to when you buy a faucet, no water comes out because they want to preserve. Even in areas that have so much water, you don't know what to do. It's called rain. It comes down from heaven. And they want to do, no water comes out of the shower. It goes drip, drip, drip. So what happens, you're in the shower 10 times as long, you know. No water comes out of the faucet. You want to wash your hands. They want to go back to even stronger than what they have right now. As you know, I ended that policy. You can have all the water you want. Makes no difference. It comes weird, especially in certain areas. We have so much water, we don't know what to do with it.
Okay, you're probably wondering what the heck is he talking about here? And at the beginning, yes, I was trying to understand what the hell is Donald Trump blabbing about. So it seems what he's complaining about are regulations. So regulations about water. You see, federal organizations, federal departments are trying to, in certain areas where there's a water shortage, places like California or in the south of the United States where there's, there are droughts. What they're trying to do is bring in measures to conserve water. And one of those measures perhaps is, changing faucets or taps or water systems to help people save water.
Donald Trump violated the Espionage Act. He kept top secret documents, they claim, strewn across this house. Flaunted papers, they say, which threaten national and global security. When FBI agents arrived, some were even spilling over the floor.
They're dangerous. You see what's happening up in the Massachusetts area with the whales, where they had 2 whales wash ashore in, I think, a 17-year period. And now they had 14 this season. The windmills are driving the whales crazy, obviously. And they had actually over, I think, 125 or something over a number of years. And we don't want that to happen.
How about climate change?
It's amazing the way a true in Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country.
Take a lot of tests.
It's early on. If you're just presented with hallucinations, that could be a variety of things, or just the cognitive problems. That could be Alzheimer's versus Parkinsonism, and that becomes a little nebulous. But once you start manifesting the hallmark motor symptoms, right? Slow movement, rigidity, mass facies, hypophonia. If a med student did not pick Parkinson's on the test, they'd be remediated.
So let me ask you: if you had, and I know you can't. You have no idea what happened in the White House, but a neurologist coming 8 times in 8 months, does that tell you anything? I know you're just sort of speculating here, but does that tell you anything or no?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they're like the best of friends or something, but that's a very specific, he's a movement disorder. That's a subspecialist in exactly what he has. And there's very few young people, like a Marine Guard. Most people would be med boarded out for any type of movement disorder at a young age. Like if you had Huntington's chorea, early onset Parkinson's, dystonia, bad essential tremor, you're usually med boarded out. So I highly doubt there's...
What does that mean, med boarded out?
Med boarded, meaning the military would not let you, if you have seizures, for example, you cannot usually be in the military. That is, you are
so
medical boarded
you're saying
out.
You don't necessarily believe, and they're not saying this, but they said there's thousands of military members that go to the White House that are treated there for health reasons.
Yeah.
You're not buying that that's a random military person.
No, that would be very odd to just see a random movement disorder case at the White House, especially a young guard. There aren't many young people that have movement disorders that could be in the military.
And then, a lot of people have called for a cognitive test. What exactly would that entail? What does that mean?
Now, that's the key, because word finding, retrieval, doesn't necessarily mean you don't know what you want to say. What I cannot comment on is his ability to make good decisions. His motor symptoms are degenerating. He has Parkinsonism. That is a fact. He has degeneration of the brain. Show me the MRI. Show me he doesn't. Put your money where your mouth is. He definitely has it. But the problem is, when you look at his situation, you can't say, oh, I know for a fact that because he didn't retrieve the word, he didn't know what he wanted to say. And that's why both him and Trump should take the 4-hour...
The cognitive test that Trump talks about is about a 10-minute test.
More detail than ever before about the cognitive test he says he passed with flying colors. But what's it really like to take the test? Who better to find out than a man who's the same age as Trump? Stephen Fabian tells us how he did.
The president can't seem to stop talking about that cognitive test he recently took.
It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
He did it again last night on Fox News.
They say, that's amazing. How did you do that?
So this is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment Test, which is easily accessible on the internet. We believe this is the test that the president took. So we have our friend Sheldon Stone here. He's going to take the test for us. Sheldon, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Here we go. First question. Please draw a line going from a number to a letter in ascending order. Draw a clock, put in all the numbers, and set the time to 10 past 11. Tell me the name of this animal.
Lion.
Tell me the name of this animal.
Rhinoceros.
Tell me the name of this animal.
Camel.
I read some words to you earlier. Tell me as many of those words as you can remember.
Face, velvet, church, daisy, red.
You nailed all the words.
I knew I would.
Dr. Thea Gallagher is a clinical psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania.
This is a test that if you do not have cognitive dysfunction, this is a test that you should pass. Unless you have some form of mild to moderate cognitive dysfunction.
Assessment, what did you think of the test? Was it difficult? Was it easy?
I thought it was really easy.
The president was the one who asked his doctors to give him the cognitive test to prove his mental acuity to the news media.
Psychological testing, which is the hallmark test for cognitive performance.
What do you do in this test?
A lot of things. So, for example, they may have you say as many words as you can in a minute that start with F. Block building, retrieval. I may say cup and have you recall it 3 minutes later. Trail drawing. These are done with a professional, a PhD in neuropsychology. Has nothing to do with psychiatry. And we can tell if you have vascular.
It's 4 hours long?
4 hours. It's a full day. We tell people bring a snack. It is a full day. And so not the MOCA, which was a bedside test that President Trump took. These are tests that are screening tests. They don't rule in, if you do great.
There's no way to sort of lie in this test, to sort of ace it even though you're sick.
No way. This one it will come out in the wash. For example, if I do the bedside exam to an accountant and I ask them, what's 100 minus 7? Even the worst neurodegenerative patient, if they worked at a high education level or something like that, is going to get that right. But in the 4-hour test, it will come out.
Finally, you said you're a Democrat, you're a doctor. You sound like you're frustrated with what the White House is saying.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because, I'm an American before everything. And I look at it and say, when I used to see Russia, Soviet Union, North Korea, when they just make outrageous things, like when North Korea can't keep the lights on and they say, it was some faulty power thing. I kind of hate that kind of stuff. They had 4 years. My own party had 4 years to find, this was a wreck in slow motion. And they had 4 years to find out of 350 Americans, one person that could take the place. And here we are the day before school trying to do the homework and replace a guy who's got a neurodegenerative disease.
Dr. Pitts, we thank you for joining Top Story. And again, I know you've never examined President Biden. I want to say that you've never spoken to President Biden, but you're going off what you've seen on television and interviews and all of your expertise. Yeah. Doctor, we appreciate that.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news.
Okay, this podcast is dedicated to the underwhelming national attention to the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. I wonder why it was treated in such a clinical way. Okay, you can listen to or see the complete podcast that was done on this in July 2024. And I put a little bit of bits and pieces on this, but the complete podcast is available. And starting and providing solutions to the plan.
Today, we're found our happy place, and we're at the Van Buren County Library in Clinton, Arkansas. Well, of course, I'm Herb Lair. I think I've introduced myself in the past, and I have a technology background with a master's in science from the University of Arkansas, and I have with me Dr. Lyda Kreiner. So you want to say any more about your background, or we'll get into a lot more detail in a little bit. So,
well, my journey, people have already heard about that.
Well, you've been writing articles and teaching online classes, so you've got a wide range as well as practical experience, and we'll get into that. But I just wanted to maybe introduce you here.
My strongest strength would probably be taking any textbook, which I did for 25 years. Was given a textbook and told to write a course for the internet that would work, and I did that for 25 years. I never taught a course that I didn't write, except one or two cases. And so I guess I can communicate pretty well.
Well, that's what.
And see what the needs are to reach our expected outcomes. That was my main job. If I did it the right way, they would expect the outcomes that the mission, it was part of the mission of the school.
The idea here, and again, I'm the one with Parkinson's, and you're just more of the caregiver and some of the things that you've done in the, of course, the national plan, and that's to more or less for Parkinson.
All right, more than 10 million people in the world are living with Parkinson's disease. Here in the U.S., nearly 90,000 people are diagnosed every year, which is why a new bill President Biden just signed into law is so important. Fox 13's Shira Masuzawa breaks it down.
For me, this bill is about hope.
Hope. A four-letter word that carries a lot of weight. And for Northwest Parkinson's Foundation's Executive Director Virgil Sweeney, President Biden signing the national plan to end Parkinson's Act into law gives a newfound hope to the nearly 1 million people in the U.S. living with Parkinson's right now.
Parkinson's disease is the fastest growing neurological disorder in the world right now.
Earlier this week, the president signed that act, making it the first ever federal legislation dedicated to ending Parkinson's disease. The legislation will increase federal research funding, develop more effective pathways for treatments and cures, and improve early diagnosis. It will also put together a task force to help people with Parkinson's, but also the caregivers and families.
Sometimes those are the people that get forgotten, and they bear a lot of the burden.
Sweeney says this takes effect next year, but it's already a huge step forward because this means resources will come sooner, and hopefully a difference will be made in the near future, not the distant future.
A lot of people with Parkinson's live in their own world, and we want to let them know it's okay to have Parkinson's, and there's a whole community available to them to help them through their journey.
The key word there is putting together a task force, which we're interested in being part of that facilitation. Okay, the national attention given is very underwhelming, and the people who talk about it is very clinical. So how could it ever succeed?
There are people with Parkinson's, and that's been, voted on, accepted by Congress, but also signed by President Biden. And so that act has been activated, but it's also there are plans in the future to bring it to the public in various ways. Now, the reason it's kind of motivated me for this podcast today was I was listening to a Q&A and it involved Leslie A. Chambers, President and CEO of American Parkinson.
Federal legislation dedicated to the prevention and cure of Parkinson's disease. Ted Thompson is the Senior Vice President of Public Policy at the Michael J. Fox Foundation, who led the advocacy team that was instrumental in getting this bill passed. Ted has more than 30 years of experience in public policy and government affairs, serving in several nonprofit leadership positions, and as well as serving on the staff for 2 members of Congress. Ted also helped create the Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council, or UPAC, of which APDA is a member. So let's bring Ted to the screen to share the latest updates on the status of this new law and explain why it's so important. Welcome, Ted.
Thanks, Leslie. Great to be here, and I appreciate the partnership with APDA through the years. You've been an important partner in advocating around public policy issues, and you mentioned UPAC. That's a broad-based effort to draw in as many Parkinson's and Parkinsonism's organizations as possible, so that on policy issues we're speaking with one voice. And a prime example of what that will get us is the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act.
Can you please give us a brief overview of the National Plan to End PD and the significance of it for our community?
Absolutely. And I will state at the outset that this was not my original idea. I saw what was working really well for the Alzheimer's community and thought, you know what, we're the second fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world, and we need a national plan to address Parkinson's, both research, care, diagnostics, the whole 9 yards. So what the national plan does is it establishes an advisory council of federal and non-federal members. That on the non-federal, they're all going to be people, experts in Parkinson's, including Parkinson's patients, caregivers, providers, researchers, and at the federal appointees will all have some role to play in the Parkinson's paradigm. So the advisory council will be established, will require the Secretary of Health and Human Services to submit a report to Congress, also identifying level of research funding that needs to happen.
Yep, you heard it right. The Secretary of Health and Human Services would be in charge. So you can imagine how much responsibility and how much money and funding would be going through Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or whomever Trump selects. I don't think he's interested in having much research on Parkinson's
Disease Association, and she brought in Ted Thompson, who's the Senior Vice President of Public Policy of the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and they talked in terms of having a national advisory council of federal and non-federal members for the research, care, and caregivers. So we feel like we have put together a coalition of people, and we're working on other people but ourselves. I've been doing a podcast and also to educate, and as I've mentioned in the past, that many people have issues with anxiety and depression, and we've talked about some of that, but that's one of the big things that's not only with Parkinson's, but people that's been found to commit suicide, and also other people that are involved with disabilities or even no disabilities. They have those issues. But I've been trying to do this podcast so it can be visual on YouTube, and you can find that under my channel. That's Herb Lair under YouTube, and the name of it is Finding Your Happy Place. But recently, and that's why we're getting a bigger distribution and people that are listening, is from our Apple Podcast, and you'll find that that's primarily audio, but it reaches a lot broader group of people, and they can listen to it when they're traveling, and so it's very good for mobility. But we understand that in order to get this idea that we're presenting in front of people, that we're going to have to work with a lot of politicians and even businesses. The idea is that a big company, even like Walmart or some of the other large companies that's in Arkansas, such as Tyson's or even Missouri Bass Pro, or it's going to be a good program and content for their employees in order to take care of their health care. And then also they may see fit to have something like this available to their customers. So we're going to get into that a little more in detail, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what I saw in the Q&A as far as the act, and they said this could be a Trojan horse, and we have to be careful in what we think about and recommend, and that's why we wanted to present what we bring to the table, but also that we have some skills that have been proven, and we know some people and things that can help in not only prevention but better care for people. So I want that to be part of our discussion today, and I think the point that Ted Thompson made was, he said, to make sure government does what it's told to do by Congress.
Government. One point that I want to make, though, is we need to make sure that the government does what it's been told to do. Sometimes things like this pass, everybody does their victory lap and says how great we are because we did this bill, and then they move on to something else. That's a recipe for failure. And so we are going to be keeping an eye on this, watching this, working with you and others to make sure that the federal government does what it's been told to do by Congress.
Right. The whole race isn't finished until we get to the end, and that's the point of advocacy, that we will be staying on top of that, and all the groups combined.
I've seen that in a lot of cases where it comes a boondoggle pretty fast if they don't. And so we're hoping that people with skills, and we're going to talk about what we think is necessary in our coalition. So I wanted to start with that background, and then start with Lida talking about some of the things that she's been involved with, and some things, material. I know she's writing some articles now, and so you want to just give me some thoughts. And is it if I was sitting there as an individual, and I've seen that in some cases where people isolate themselves and they just get further and further away from people,
right,
and they start losing their voice, and a lot of issues come about.
Physical strength.
Yeah, the thing about seeing a Parkinson doctor, and I'm saying one that takes care of you and looks at the test, and you get tests every quarter, and then maybe a major test every 6 months, but you know exactly where you are and where your level is, and that's the thing you have to do when you look at a person with Parkinson's, whether it's the president speaking. Is not what he's doing today, it's what he did yesterday, 6 months ago, or a year, and see where he's going to be in the next 6 months or a year. I'm not saying it as a political statement, but anybody like myself, and that's one of the benefits of doing a podcast, is people can see where I am and what kind of things I'm doing and how it's, how effective it is. So that's one of the things I want to measure. I've got some videos from a year ago, and I've been doing quite a few more since I moved to Little Rock, and it's part of it is sort of self-serving, but it's also an opportunity for other people to tell their stories.
So what happens in 2025 with a national plan to end Parkinson's? Will it have any support or funding, or will it be something that sits till the next president?